Got to make sure we have the right music as we get started, right? Because we have an important topic to talk about. So I really wanted to do a video on talking about the recent discussion and discourse surrounding the use of the term JRPG or Japanese role-playing game for that genre of video games. And you have some examples here on the screen. This is actually just like a collage image for that Nintendo made. And you got some examples of like what are classically considered JRPGs. Things like Chrono Cross, 13 Sentinel Triangle Strategy. You also have games in there like Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy and stuff like that. And there's been a recent conversation about it, if you haven't heard at this point, which was about some of Japanese developers finding the coined term of the genre JRPG to be offensive, to be derogatory in a way. And you know, there's merit behind it, and we'll get into why that is in just a second. But this all came up because a handful of content creators were invited to Japan, flown to Japan by Square Enix to have a in-house look at Final Fantasy XVI, which is super cool. Congratulations to those people. I've watched several of the videos of the people that got to be there and stuff like that. Final Fantasy 16 looks excellent. But one of the people that went, Ralph from Australia, also goes by the YouTube channel SkillUp. He got to interview one of the leads on the project, which is Yoshinori, no, not Katase, which is Yoshi-P, who is the director of Final Fantasy 14 and is also the lead working on Final Fantasy 16. And he asked, you know, what are you hoping to see or achieve with Final Fantasy 16 within the JRPG genre? Because Yoshi-P talked about how he wanted Final Fantasy to evolve, essentially, with Final Fantasy 16. And Yoshi-P took a slight aside to, you know, just, he wasn't angry or, like, you know, like upset with Ralph for asking the question. But he was like, you know, we don't normally call them JRPGs here because to us they're just RPGs, and RPGs was for so long a really negative term associated with the genre. And that caught SkillUp by surprise because SkillUp, like myself and a very significant portion of other people, were like, but JRPGs is just a genre. It just lets you know like what it is you're getting into. And like, I love JRPGs. I do. Like, we got Final Fantasy VIII music playing right now, and JRPGs by all stretches of things are probably my favorite genre of games. Final Fantasy is something that is very, very near and dear to me and has very strongly shaped my life. But the question then came up of like, wait, why is it that Yoshi-P felt that it was so negative? Well, I grabbed some of the footage here. Let me start with this Twitter video. This Twitter video, which I don't know if is originally edited by James or Solstice here on Twitter, but this Twitter video gives you, this is kind of like a supercut. Most of the offensive material is all from G4 TV and what was it? Freaking X Attack or whatever the name of that series was that ran for a really long time. So here's some examples, okay? I have a couple others too.
You know, it's been very long that we have to do it.
Here's the one bad thing about Dragon Age 5, the blatant stereotyping. Several characters come across more as ethnic caricatures than real fleshed-out beings. Am I right, Sancho?
India, that billion-strong faux vegetarian tech support call-taking behemoth of a nation. Or the Chinese.
The blatant stereotyping.
International Sexy Lady Show. Starting in Japan.
Game titles, some are clever, some are stupid, and some don't make any damn sense.
Zatch Bell Mamoto Battles is one of those game titles.
Today we venture to the bottom of the anime bucket. Fighting dolls. This transvestite toys.
All Japanese RPGs together into one cliche of a game.
A game where androgynous men with pointy hair and scantily clad women battle evil mages to save the guy.
Unfortunately, he's trapped in a Japanese RPG, but it's hardly any worse than the dozens of other Japanese RPGs that have come down the pike.
Japanese role-playing game. The very phrase conjures up images of legendary battles, majestic stories, and noble, virtuous heroes.
Greetings! I'm Cupo of the Orosoren.
Okay, so much for that.
Who will eat the sea urchins?
The Japanese?
It's the third and final entry in a series of long-winded, poorly named role-playing games.
Dragon Quest Joker. It's pretty much Square Enix's own version of a Pokemon game.
I would have thought by number 50 or whatever, they would have given you speech instead of text. Oh, for God's sake, get to the friggin' point. Okay, well, that was a little more to the point than I would have liked. Listen, my anime friend, you know this is wrong, so what say you just don't do it? An ellipsis? What the hell is that supposed to mean? My God, I have never understood why you guys do that. How much time do players waste in their lifetimes clicking past stupid ellipses?
Don't you just love multiculturalism?
Yeah, so that's just some of it. That is just some of it. One of the ones that was referenced a lot is this particular review that XPlay did, which is part of the G4 TV brand.
Who will replace us? India, that billion-strong faux vegetarian tech support call-taking behemoth of a nation. Or the Chinese.
Here's this clip again.
Certainly not Japan, because while they may be technologically advanced and financially powerful, they're already in decline. You want proof? Here's Baten Kaito's origins.
One of the few RPG refugees that made it to the GameCube's purple shores was Baten Kaito's Eternal Wings in the Lost Ocean. Lucky for all 27 of you people who bought it, there's now a prequel, Baten Kaito's Origins. Origins dumps you right in the middle of the gameplay without preamble. This shouldn't be a problem, seeing as how it's nearly identical to its predecessor.
We'll all be killed if we don't do something.
So do something! I'll write the story. Let me guess. There's probably a young hero with some sort of memory problem who's fighting a vastly overwhelming Evo.
By the way, this was on television.
It's too soon to reveal my hand.
The bow you're wearing really takes the edge off the evil mastermind thing. Cliché burden boy of action who will save us all is named Sagi.
This is kind of overdue, but I'm Sagi.
Rhymes with Saki. Saki! Which I
Not
could
how you
use a
pronounce
lot of
sake.
right now.
Sagi.
Saki! Baten Kaitos features voice acting of plenty of surprisingly good quality.
Show me your wings again.
All right, take a good look.
Does it count as sexual harassment if her wings were asking for it?
This had better not be another ploy to see my wings.
And apparently nothing says prequel like improved breast physics on the shopkeepers.
Sagi!
Sake! Origins uses the same painted background art style as the first Baten Kaitos. Many of the early attack cards use the same exact artwork. Yes, I said cards. Baten Kaitos still uses card battle combat. Every weapon, spell, sundry, ducat, novelty, or quest item is magically imbibed into cards called Magnus. You can trap the essence of anything you want, like the local town gossip, and meat fit for an emperor.
Boys like you are so hard to find.
Feels like my days as a congressional page all over again. You can chain the cards together to add maximum damage.
So like this is all like still pretty
Lady Luck, that bitch.
What it is.
There are new tweaks to the card system, but the changes don't go deep enough to really make a difference.
Sagi!
Sagi! Will you shut up about Sagi?
Sagi!
Sagi! Sagi! Sagi! Baten Kaitos Origin is an RPG for the GameCube. That about says it all. A 3. Saki! 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 Out of 5.
You may have won the day, but I assure you, I'll be back to settle the
score.
That was the score. Now show a little wig, baby.
Oh, it's not over yet.
I think your alcoholism is starting to get in the way of your game reviews.
I don't drink because I need to drink. I drink because I like the taste. Because life is painful.
So was that video. Anyway, so having now watched those pieces and supercuts of the type of stuff that aired on G4 TV and XPlay, which was part of G4 TV, it was part of their like video game review section. I never saw that stuff, and also, like, even if I would have saw that stuff, like, G4 was really big back in, like, what, like 2002 through 2007? So, I mean, I wasn't terribly old at that point in time. We didn't have the channel that G4 was on, which is probably a good thing, like, geez. But, yeah, so, like, if that's the type, G4 was one of the largest pieces of media coverage for video games at the time. Video games have struggled to have any type of like major mainstream level of journalism or like professional appeal. And the part of it's probably because like video games are very often associated with children, even though some of the largest consumers of video games are like between the ages of like 22 and 36. But that's not the point. But so, you know, we don't have major outlets. Like IGN is still one of the largest gaming outlets ever. There are bigger ones in Japan because you have things like Famitsu and stuff like that over there that are pretty well respected reporting agencies. But like, what did we have? We had like G4 and Game Informer, and that was kind of it, right? And so if that was your, but neither IGN nor Game Informer were on TV, right? And like GameSpot TV was only in GameStop TV is only available in GameStop. So the only like major media presence for video games was G4. And if that's the type of media coverage that you're seeing, yeah, I can totally understand where you would think that the phrase JRPG is being used to insult you. Because it is. Boy, howdy is it. By the way, can we just, that whole shit was offensive as hell. Like a whole bunch of it. Like it was just awful. That's what people used to watch. Like, no wonder freaking gaming media television failed. Because that's what we were being given. It was like, that was completely and utterly crafted for like really offensive 15-year-old boys that thought that they were edgy by being racist. And none of that was true. They were also about the whole, if you don't like it, don't watch it when they were giving criticism. That's also true. Yeah. And like, you know, criticism's a really good thing. You don't always, the person receiving the criticism doesn't always have to like address it, but your answer isn't just like, oh, fuck you, bro. Anyway, so yeah, I can understand where you'd see that as offensive. Also, there's been a bunch of people that I've been seeing on, you know, the social medias that have been like, JRPG isn't derogatory or offensive. They need to just get over it. And like, by the way, you don't get to decide that for them. You don't get to decide for them what they take as an insult, okay? That's not how that works. Just because you don't mean for it to be offensive doesn't mean that it isn't offensive to them. That's not how it works, all right? Just let me clarify that for you. So if Yoshi-P says that JRPG is offensive, then it's offensive to Yoshi-P. End of story. Now, there have been some other Japanese devs that have come out and be like, no, we take a lot of pride in the phrase in the genre that is JRPGs. Bandai Namco is pretty much like not a sister company to Square Enix by any means, but they are, in my immediate mind, the second largest creator of JRPGs. And so there was some Bandai Namco devs that were like, no, we take pride in the JRPGs that we make. And I think that that's perfectly fine. But we don't get to decide that JRPG as a genre is offensive or not. And the problem also stems in just how hard it is to define video game genres as well. Like the action-adventure genre. What is that? What games exist within the action-adventure genre? Do you want to know a couple of games that exist? Like, it's stuff literally like The Legend of Zelda, God of War. Like, sure, they're kind of similar, but are you going to say that those are the same? Are you going to say that those are similar? You know what else is action-adventure? A ton of other games. And even if we look into a more specific genre, like, we'll go into RPGs. First, RPG, way too wide. That's why there are breakdowns. Mario, again, another action-adventure game. Some people will call Mario games, depending on the one that you're playing, they'll call them action platformers. But like, Final Fantasy XVI is going to be an action RPG. But because it's made by Square Enix and it's coming out of Japan, it's still being called an action JRPG. But they don't call, like, Devil May Cry an action JRPG. But that's because Devil May Cry gets a very unique moniker of being a spectacle fighter, a character action fighter, rather than an action RPG. And in a way, I mean, they literally have the Devil May Cry director. Devil May Cry 5's director is one of the leads that is working on Final Fantasy 16. It's going to be closer to Devil May Cry 5 than it's going to be to most other action RPGs. But you want to know what else counts as like an action RPG? Diablo. Diablo is technically listed as an action RPG. Diablo and Devil May Cry are nowhere close to one another whatsoever at all. Are they both role-playing games? Yeah, sure, but they're not the same game. But that's also why, like, when I talk about Diablo, I call Diablo and Diablo-style games, I call them isometric action RPGs. Does that make the mouth a little bit full? Yeah, sure, but it gives you a much clearer idea of what I'm talking about. Because other action RPGs are like Final Fantasy VII Remake, and Final Fantasy VII Remake plays very different from Diablo, and it's going to play very different from Final Fantasy 15, which plays very different from Forspoken, which is going to play very different from Final Fantasy 16, and so on. Scarlet Nexus is an action RPG, and it's going to play very, very different from all of those. And then, like, Elden Ring and Dark Souls are technically action RPGs, but because they have their own like nuance in there, that's where the genre Souls-like came from, which I hate. I hate calling them Souls-likes. I don't like calling anything like roguelikes. I don't like that either. I feel like that is a bad terminology because it relies so heavily on you understanding what a different game is. Telling someone that it's a Souls-like and them not knowing what Dark Souls is means that they have no idea what kind of game you're talking about until they know, right? And like, I've been calling them Soulsians, which is still just not a good term, and I dislike that. So, 99% of the time, they're all thrown in action. Well, I mean, even on top of that, there's a problem with action-adventure versus action. Those are two different categories at the Game Awards. God of War won Action-Adventure Game of the Year, and Bayonetta 3 won Action Game of the Year. So it's like, you have this even more narrower extension, like division in there. It's kind of like the Oscars having one of the Oscar categories for the Academy Awards is comedy/musical. Those are not the same thing at all. You're going to tell me that like Liar Liar and Les Mis should go in the same category? You're going to put Hamilton and like freaking Big Daddy in the same category? No, those are not the same whatsoever at all. And so the same issues exist in video games, right? A role-playing game is like all character games, technically. You take on a role. Yes, classification is bad. ISO RPG could work though. And sure, if you wanted to shorten isometric RPG down to ISO RPG, that works. And that's like CRPGs, computer RPG, and that's talking about things like Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, Divinity Original Sin. Those are the Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader. Those are all called CRPGs. They're no longer limited to computers, but that's where they were for a long time. And that just lets you know that that's what that is. They're kind of like ISO RPGs, but they're not ISO RPGs. ISO action RPGs, ISO ARPGs. See, here's where it starts to get into like that weird nexus of strings. So then it's like, okay, well, what do you call JRPGs if you're not calling them JRPG? And there's actually some pretty decent options out there, right? Like, for instance, like Persona and Final Fantasy X, okay? Like if we compare like Persona 4, Final Fantasy X, they came out not actually that close to one another, but whatever. With that in mind, welcome in, Roman Edge. I'm gonna let that roll off real quick. With that in mind, like Final Fantasy X and Persona, sure, they're both JRPGs, but at the same time, they feel so different. And that's because Persona has the social sim elements. It's got such a visual novel energy in it and to it. And so it's like, are those both technically JRPGs? Yeah, sure, they're both JRPGs with the way that we classify it right now. But there's also like, I actually asked a friend who is taking issue with like, if there's Japanese devs that don't like that we call it JRPGs, why did my music stop? If there's JRPG devs that don't like that we call it, speaking of Persona, that's the song that just came on, that don't like that we call it JRPGs, then we should call it something else. Thank you so much, Roman Edge. I appreciate it. Get some rest. then like what do we call them instead? And we came up with some options, and it's things like narrative driven RPGs, story based RPGs. We actually already use one, and it's turn based RPGs, because when Final Fantasy moved from being a turn based RPG to the action RPGs that they are now, we started to make that distinction of when it moved away from turn based and when it moved into action RPGs. And so we already do that in a way. But for the most part, when I think of JRPGs, I normally think of something close to turn-based, not always, like active time battles, or even like Final Fantasy VII has turn-based elements in it, while having a like grand adventure anime style theme to it. Not always is it like anime style necessarily, but it's in that relative vein of being kind of with a cartoony element, has that kind of like anime style and design to it, because like Tales of Arise is definitely an action game, but it is also very easy to classify it as a JRPG. It's got anime characters, anime tropes, it's got this grandiose storyline with crazy things happening in it, right? Things that you don't see even in like more grounded Western RPGs, which we don't even call things Western RPGs anymore. So I don't actually know where I'm going with this as a whole, but I think it's an important conversation to have. But it's a conversation that has to like live, and it has to continue to be had. Because it's not like, if you just go, no, I disagree with Yoshi-P, he shouldn't be offended that G4 TV was assholes back in 2004. No, you don't get to say that. Sorry. There was, and like after they made that, pointed that out, I was like, I definitely remember being into JRPGs in like middle school and high school, and there were the fucking Call of Duty bros that were like, you like that anime weeb bullshit? And no matter what it was, if they heard JRPGs, they just automatically turned their brains turned off, because they just knew, like, it's like, you know, if you don't like them, that's fine, but it definitely just got slotted alongside that. And those same people probably really would like Final Fantasy 16, because it is a like a high fantasy medieval looking style game with really gritty looking effects in it and stuff like that. Like, it still has very slight anime features in like the character designs, the faces and stuff, but otherwise, like, you could have told me that that was made by a Western studio and I probably would have believed you, right? Like, because it's got such a Western feel to it. And that's where the difficulty comes in. There's still some people like that, and it's similar with anime too. Yep, they just automatically turn their brain off. There's no way I could like it because anime, no matter what, is terrible. And then there are people that were shown stuff like, you know, you could go with like younger options like Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh, or they were shown things that were like, I know somebody, oh god, I know somebody that their initial recommendation, if somebody has not watched an anime, they recommend them fucking Fooly Cooly. That is the first thing they show people, and I'm like, that is the worst thing to show someone who has not watched anime. You don't even, if somebody's only a casual anime watcher, you don't have them watch Fooly Cooly, okay? That is some of the weirdest and most wild crap ever. Don't show people Fooly Cooly unless you think that they are specifically somebody who would appreciate and enjoy Fooly Cooly, ever. But if you took some of those people that don't like anime and had them watch like Vinland Saga, they would probably freaking love Vinland Saga, right? These are the same people that enjoy Teen Titans. And like Teen Titans, I know it was made by Western studios. It's an anime, okay? Teen Titans is an anime. So is freaking Avatar: The Last Airbender. Those are animes, all right? It does not matter if they were not made in Japan. I do not feel like it has to come from Japan. Anime just is a style. And I think that's where how a lot of people feel about JRPGs as well, is that JRPGs don't necessarily have to come from Japan. They are a style. Trying to fight with the internet tonight? I will fight with the internet. I am loud and I am very opinionated. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is. Do I like the option of like calling like extra genres in there? Yeah, I do. It's like music, right? Like you can call something house music, but there's 47 different types of house music that exist within that genre. And they just get more and more and more and more specific, right? And really, from what I can immediately think of, JRPG is the only, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, is the only like racially charged genre that exists within video games. There's lots of like racial type music that exists, right? Like people just straight up call, you know, if I say, oh, that's Mexican music, that's Hispanic music, you know, your mind immediately thinks of a specific type of music. J-pop, K-pop, right? Like, you know, German grunge, you know, immediately your brain just fills with that. But you know, some people might not like K-pop or J-pop or Hispanic music or anything like that. And I'm sure there are people that are out there that use them in a negative fashion because they don't like them or because they're racist. But with JRPGs, we just watched not too long ago just how charged that phrase was and how aggressively it was used to downplay games. Even, I don't care if the game is bad or not, all right? If you thought the game was bad, whatever. But the game is not bad simply because it's a JRPG, all right? If you don't like JRPGs, maybe you shouldn't be playing or reviewing them because you're just going to have this really heavy predetermined bias against it. So, blah. Show them Fist of the North Star or Ninja Scroll. Akira. I don't normally recommend Akira either. It's not the worst option, but I don't think it's the best one either. But yeah, so the problem is that this won't change unless larger powers that be change it, right? People like IGN, Kotaku, Gematsu, Famitsu, larger organizations, Game Informer, you know, like they have to, like Game Informer is actually still around, by the way. If you didn't know, you can still actually get Game Informer. You can get digital Game Informer, and you can even actually still get physical copies of the Game Informer magazine. Anyway, yeah, like as much as I could be, you know, say like, yeah, okay, I'll try to figure out something else to refer to JRPGs with, right? While I am a YouTuber and I technically have a platform, my platform is the size of my pinky nail. Like, I'm not changing a whole lot on my own, but like I can try, right? And that's kind of the point of this video, is like, let's bring up the issue and let's talk about it and let's see how other people feel about it and let's move forward in what it is. Do we need to start just referring to turn-based RPGs as turn-based RPGs and not just saying that they're JRPGs? Do we need to refer to Persona not even as a JRPG or as a turn-based RPG? Does it need to be a, you know, a VNTB RPG, a visual novel style turn-based RPG? Is that a lot to say? Yes, but does it actually give you a lot better idea of what the game is than just calling it a JRPG? Yeah, it really does. That's why, like I was talking about Diablo with calling them isometric action RPGs. Gives you a much, much better idea of what you're going to be playing. And we already get a lot of words and phrases stapled together onto there, you know? You got things like isometric action MMORPG for things like Lost Ark and stuff like that. We just, if the game fits more genres, tag them on there. Does it make it a big word soup? Yeah, but it actually makes it easier to define what the game is and helps people decide if it's something they're going to be interested in. Blanket terms do work, but they're not actually that effective at communicating an idea, especially because they are such a wide umbrella that they're casting a net over. And that's one of the problems with RPG in general, because role-playing games are so vast and so wide now. I don't have the answer, but I think the closest thing we have is to just doing our best to try and be more specific about it, because it removes the racially charged nature of calling something a Japanese RPG, and doing so will allow us to actually be more accurate in what we're talking about when we refer to specific games, because even the games that you see on the screen right now, there are distinct differences across all of these, because you have things like Rune Factory 5, which has farming elements in it, versus Chrono Cross, which is a more traditional turn-based RPG, versus 13 Sentinels Aegis Rim, which is actually more of a visual novel that is tied with pseudo like tactical RTS style elements in it. these are all very, very distinctly different games. Triangle Strategy is a tactical turn-based RPG along the lines of like Fire Emblem and XCOM. So there's such significant difference just in these games that are on the screen right now. So let's try to be better, and let's try to be more descriptive in what we're saying, because unfortunately the people that had the power before us, they made this not something that we should use. And the most that we can try to do is just try to be better in ourselves and with others moving forward. But that's really all I have to say. I've been rambling for a while. If you watched this whole video, thank you a lot for watching it. Thank you to Roman for coming in. Thank you to those that were in the chat that contributed to the conversation. I appreciate all of you a lot. Let me know what your thoughts are. Put them down in the comments below. If you want to keep up with the conversation elsewhere, two great places to do so are Discord and Twitter. We recorded this live on Twitch because we do stream on Twitch, and I'd love to see you there. And if you did enjoy this video, maybe leave it a like. If you want to catch future videos, please subscribe to the channel. Do watch one of the other videos on the channel, or if I see you in the live stream, thank you and enjoy.